Welcome to the Tech Talks Daily Podcast, where you can learn and be inspired by real-world examples of how technology is transforming businesses and reshaping industries in a language everyone can understand. Here is your host, Neil C. Hughes.
Welcome back to the Tech Talks Daily Podcast, where every day we explore a different topic in technology and try to demystify some of the complexity and put it all in a language everyone can understand. And when it comes to DAOs, or Decentralized Autonomous Organizations, I know from some of your emails that many of you are still intimidated by this space. So today, I want to try and change all that. So if you want to learn more about what are DAOs, how do they work, why you should care about them, the most interesting use cases for DAOs right now, and even explore if DAOs could replace corporations and become the dominant organisational form for human capital and creativity in the future, or how to invest in DAOs without losing your money or becoming the victim of fraud, you come to the right place. Because today, Dennis Bertram from Tally is going to join us on the podcast. Now, Tally is a DAO operations platform that allows anyone to start, join and grow a decentralized organisation. So we're going to try and demystify all that today, and I invite you along to join me. So buckle up and hold on tight as I beam your ears all the way to Prague, where Dennis Bertram is waiting to join us today. So a massive warm welcome to the show. Can you just tell the listeners a little about who you are and what you do?
Yeah, so my name is Dennison Bertram. I am the CEO and co-founder of Tally. Tally is a DAO operations platform. We are the best place to start, build, and grow your online DAO community. We like to think of DAOs as, beyond decentralized organizations, but really kind of internet native startups, internet native communities. So we think we are one of the best places to do that, and you should come do it on us. Other than that, I've been in crypto for about more than 10 years. I was an early Bitcoiner, went through all the different, phases of crypto. I'm kind of like a crypto boomer now, where people are like, oh, these are the first airdrops. I'm like, bollocks. The first airdrops were in 2014. What are you talking about? So that's kind of me in a nutshell. Now really just passionate about decentralized organizations. I'm really into leaderless organizations personally, want to build tools and structures and processes and, social norms that allow us to build really cool new kinds of organizations that wouldn't have been possible before.
And if I was to take you back in time for a moment, can you remember where your passion for all things tech, blockchain, crypto, DAO, etc., where all that came from, or the moment that put you on the path you're on today? Or should I say, what's your origin story?
Yeah. So I've always been into tech stuff. I was into tech stuff as a high schooler in the ancient other times. But I spent a long time as a artist. I was a well-known fashion photographer for a long time. I built a creative technology company that helped fashion brands sort of navigate the digital world as they sort of moved from traditional print into the digital space. But I was kind of catalyzed in a number of ways. I studied political science in school. I was the class I was in during September 11th, when the September 11th attacks were going on, was focused on how global wealth inequality would drive a rise in radical religious terrorism, and I was covering Islamic and Catholic terrorism, and that was the class I was in. So September 11th was really a pretty catalyzing moment, sort of understanding the trajectory of like the world, and sort of understanding how really small, seemingly small, isolated events sort of like really drastically shift history. You sort of think about like, pre-World War I or whatever, like the assassination of Franz Ferdinand, and how that sort of like seemingly big, small thing sort of like catalyzed the rest of the century, and how, September 11th really, for me and at the time, sort of seemed like, oh, this is going to really catalyze the rest of the century. And indeed, it kind of has, right? But it really set off a number of these other things that are happening at the same time, which sort of partially led to, and I'm not going to get into all of them because this is, it'll be forever. But 2008 was also a huge shock. Something I sort of like talk to people about who are a lot younger. is how the world was so different before September 11th, and it was so different before 2008. And these things for me felt like really political events, but it didn't really seem possible to make a change in politics after September 11th. After September 11th, it just seemed like reason went out the door, sort of like compromise went out the door, and the global order was about, maybe I was just a naive student and it was always about force, but it was about sort of like irreconcilable sort of perspectives. And that was always sort of bothering me because I felt like, okay, well, I can't really make a difference here. When the Bitcoin white paper came out, it really clicked in for me that Bitcoin was free speech applied to code as political thought, right? Like this idea of decentralized consensus is really a very, very political statement in and of itself, right? Like you have laws guaranteeing the freedom and rights to assemble. And then, of course, whenever the government gets a little bit antsy, the first thing they do is they take away your right to like get together and assemble, right? Like you're not allowed to go outside and like meet up together. No. And this idea that you could create consensus on this new digital realm, which was quickly becoming the sort of like, the place that we're building the future, really got to me, right? Like the monetary component I thought was very important, but the money, Bitcoin as money, I think is only just one feature of this like deeper political idea of like consensus, right? And consensus being something that could be done through math rather than through fiat or through fiat violence, force, right? So that's what really started me down this path, and that has always been something that's really like driven me and kept me involved in the sort of blockchain space. And DAOs are kind of, for me, a really specific implementation of this kind of like radical idea. Something that I talk about a lot is corporations are inherently unfair organizations, but they're not unfair for the reasons that people sort of expect they are unfair, right? And indeed, they are unfair for the reasons that people expect that they're unfair, but they're unfair because they are so discriminatory in the capability of people to participate in it. And this legal personhood or legal organization is so critical to being able to do any sort of like really, intellectually multiplying efforts in modern society, right? So, an example that I give a lot, and this is going from origin story to like just big thing, but here we are. An example I give is that here in America, if I create a company, right, and we're going to build something that's around some sort of idea, right, and it's a really specific idea, and there's only a few people in the world who could do it. I can't just go hire you, right? Like to hire you, I actually have to ask the U.S. government for permission to hire you, right? Which is very interesting, right? Like the U.S. government has this authority over with whom I can multiply my intellectual capabilities with to create something new. Maybe it makes one thing, okay, you're gonna come to America and we're gonna dig coal together. Okay, that could be one thing where you would say, okay, well, maybe, you're going to have to like get some paperwork. I disagree with that whole idea of borders and stuff like that, but I'm not going to get into that. But when we are talking on the purely information level, on the purely like intellectual realm, why on earth should I have to ask the U.S. government to employ you, right? If we're just doing if we're just clicking on our keyboard all day long, right? Like on a machine that was made in China, why do I have to ask the U.S. government to like slack you and then pay you for whatever you slack me back with, right? So this seems very silly at first, but then it really gets big very quickly, right? You look at how there's other nations where there may be talent, but that talent isn't actually able to capitalize on their intellectual capabilities because they don't have access to an intellectual marketplace like the United States, right? They have to go through some visa business or blah, 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 blah. And in this case, why should it matter? So people counter with that and be like, well, Dennison, that's not true. You could just use a PEO firm. We use a PEO firm, Oh, well, at Tally, we don't use a PEO firm, but like other companies use PEO firms, and people have told me about PEO firms, and PEO firms reach out and they're like, oh, Dennison, we're going to help you scale your business by hiring talent anywhere in the world. And then the pitch goes, and what it's going to look like is we are going to set up some entity in that company, and we're going to find you a whole bunch of sugarcane workers, and you're going to pay us $100, and we'll give them some fraction of that $100. And these sugarcane workers, they don't belong to you. You don't have to worry about it. Like, you can fire them whenever you want. You don't have any responsibility to them. We are your proxy, so you can just extract their extract their value out of them from a distance, and we'll take a hefty cut, right? And that is horrible, right? That's like digital neocolonialism right there. And that kind of business model is only enabled by what? States, right? The fact that like all these different countries that set up their own sort of laws around this. And what it does is it just gives this marketplace for intermediaries, which looks exactly like colonialism, right? Like, you need some sugar, I'll hire you a whole bunch of folks in sugarcane land, and like, you don't have to deal with anything. We'll take care of any problems, right? Like, it looks the same thing, but on an intellectual level, right? And the cost of that is huge. Like, they take something like 18%. The folks that are trying to like sell us take like 18%. So that kind of extraction of value for me is unacceptable, right? Like, it's unacceptable. I can reach you on Slack instantly. Here we are on Zoom. I'm going to be paying some like virtual entity 18% of like money that could be going to you, right? Just to handle the paperwork of the sort of like concept of like, we have to like ask permission to like interact with each other in a productive way, right? For me, bullshit, right? Yeah.
I was going to say, it was that realization there, wasn't it, that ultimately led you to Tally, which is the DAO operations platform, helping users to start, join, and grow decentralized organizations. There's so much movement in this space, and it's so exciting right now. But can you tell me more about the story behind the company and the problems those problems that you set out to solve?
Yeah, so the story of the company is pretty interesting. My co-founder and I, we used to work at this place called Crypto NYC in New York, which was in the sort of 2016, 2017 era, like the place to go if you were doing your like East Coast ICO roadshow. And we just used to talk about a lot of ideas. And there were a lot of early DAO projects that were coming through, like MakerDAO, Aragon. And we were really excited about this idea of creating digital native organizations, but it seemed too early. Right. I give this talk a lot called Magic Internet Society. And basically I talk about how the future is just us building all these like iterative steps on top of sort of like wild previous ideas until they become not so wild. So we start with like magic internet money, and then you can have like magic internet banking, and then you can have magic internet financial systems, right? But you can't start with magic internet financial systems, right? Like, nobody's going to set up like a Uniswap for monopoly money, right? Like, you have to make monopoly money something real first. So at the time, there wasn't really much to use decentralized organizations for, right? You'd say, yeah, we have a decentralized organization, and be like, well, what do we do? It's like, well, we vote on stuff. But for the most part, though, the concept of like internet money and sort of like this ability for you to like create your organization's money was still very young, and it wasn't very clear what you would use the internet organization for and how it actually was better than sort of like physical or like real world, or I don't know what you want to call it, like paper organization. So it felt too early. And then what happened in, I think it's like 2019, the summer of 2019, or DeFi summer, I'm sort of forgetting what year DeFi summer was. Compound released the Comp token, which was a governance token for the Compound protocol. And they built something called the Governor, the Compound Governor. And this was kind of, for us, a really special moment, because there have been DAOs before, MakerDAO, for example. Aragon had built DAOs. These are all very kind of, first of all, these were all very complicated organizations. MakerDAO, Aragon, there were complicated structures. They're very large structures, very heavy, and a little bit confusing to use. I mean, MakerDAO was kind of like famous for how they named everything with 3-letter acronyms, and you couldn't figure out how it worked. But Compound compound governor was just this really simple, streamlined, simple DAO structure, which was like one token, one vote, and you came together and you voted to reach a quorum to make some sort of change. And suddenly, Compound had revenue, right? It made money. It managed a huge amount of money. It was really clear that, oh, this is the first thing that we really need DAOs for. We need DAOs to run these decentralized financial protocols, because financial protocols have their own whole world of like legal issues and problems and stuff like that. They really needed the decentralized networks to manage them safely. So we saw that happen, and it really felt for us, for Raf and I, that now is the time for DAOs. Like finally, they really made sense. They were going to run this new system that had billions of dollars in it, and had all these different sort of like digital machines that needed to be managing. And that's when we started Tally.
And it is it's very early on in this industry at the moment, and there's a lot of hype and talk about decentralized autonomous organizations, or DAOs. But I'm curious, there's someone right in the heart of it all. What is the most interesting uses for DAOs right now that you're seeing?
So interesting is a little bit of a loaded word, right?
Yeah.
There's things that are very cool. Nouns DAO obviously is having a moment right now. They have a shit ton of money, and you get to vote on how to spend it. That is always very attractive and fun. And they're really into having people build things that make their thing bigger. So that's quite an exciting idea, that people are just sort of like earning money by making the system even bigger and bigger. And it's very exciting. So I think that definitely at the moment ranks right up there with the most exciting thing happening. I think there's other exciting things going on as well. People are starting to make really internet native organizations, things that just exist in the internet. I think Nouns DAO qualifies as well, but you have people building just new projects that you wouldn't really have been able to build in previous times, right? Because they wouldn't have made sense. There's one that I created that I'm sort of always shilling on every sort of podcast, so I'm going to shill it again, called Dao'S, which is this just decentralized community building a video game together.
Yeah.
And it's a leaderless organization. People come and they go, people earn reputation, people build things, people get paid to work for it, people get paid to work on it. It is such an exciting thing that would not have been possible before DAOs, right? It would not have been possible to get together, 10 or 20,000 people around the world, say we're going to work on a video game together, and we are going to have a big treasury full of money that we can pay with one another, but we don't have to trust any one of us to hold the access to this money. The smart contracts will trustlessly intermediate our political disputes, and everyone knows how the system operates, and everyone can plan and expect on how it's going to work. And because of that, we can actually coordinate together, because there's this system that will sort out disagreements, right? And will manage, our needs to get paid and run it and all this jazz. So those kinds of organizations are really pretty amazing. DeFi as well, things like Uniswap are really pretty awesome. Uniswap, of course, still has a company behind it. It's really interesting to see, although like folks like Sushi and Urine maybe have fallen a little bit on hard times, the fact that they are trying to build these like decentralized first organizations is really exciting as well. It's such an exciting time where you see that people can take code and turn them into organizations run by just, countless individuals. At the same time, I think it's also very interesting if we look at what's happening right now with Tornado Cash, right? Tornado started as a company. Now it's a DAO, but now it's very unclear what that even means right now that it's been on this, now that's been labeled, basically been sanctioned, which is kind of crazy and out of scope for this conversation. But so now I think the maybe more exciting thing is that DAOs are actually finally meeting the states, right? The governments, and we're trying to start figure out what that means.
And I know it's very early days. It's probably too premature to even bring this up in conversation, but do you see a moment where DAOs will replace corporations and actually become that dominant organizational form for human capital and creativity, etc.? Do you think that will happen?
Absolutely. I do think that'll happen. The reason why I think that'll happen is DAOs are inherently more capital efficient.
Yeah.
They are, you can raise tens of millions of dollars and get tens of thousands of members and participants in an organization, in a DAO, in one day, right? You could do it in a matter of hours, right? To build an organization that spans tens of countries, that manages millions of dollars, is incredibly slow and expensive in the meat space world, right? You would have to go to every one of these countries, hire a law firm there, incorporate your documents, open bank accounts, get signature authorities, entrust levels of management and authority. It would be an incredibly expensive process, right? If you think about building an organization that keeps $100 million in a bank account and it's global and has offices in just countless countries and participants, like people working for it in countless countries, you can imagine that if you have a treasury of $100 million, some significant percentage of that is going to be spent simply existing for that organization, right? If you think about how much it would cost for the lawyers in all these places, you're talking a bill of millions of dollars a year just to manage that. But with DAOs, you can do that. The cost of scaling from maintaining an organization of 2 people and $5 to a million people and $100 million is relatively the same, right? It's the bare minimum, just from the sort of like attorney, quote unquote, attorney fees. Smart contracts cost maybe $30 to deploy, and that's it, right? Discord is free, Telegram is free, Twitter is free. So the other crazy thing is that this organization that manages tens of millions of dollars with participants all around the world, it may exist for only days, maybe weeks, right?
Yeah.
If you built that in the sort of traditional world, right, you couldn't close $100 million organization in a year.
Mm.
Right? It wouldn't be possible, right? And it would still cost you millions of dollars just to close that organization, right? Yeah. So if you think about how incredibly capital inefficient corporations are, especially corporations in the internet, it for me it feels clear that decentralized organizations are the future, right? The DAOs are the future because they don't necessarily have to replace corporations, right? Like, there will still be things that, if you're going to go build a mine, maybe a traditional corporation is going to still be a better look and feel for you. But if you're going to build a blockchain-based dating app, maybe actually, the DAO structure is going to be much better for you, right? So I think, in X number of years, DAOs will become a serious competitor to standard traditional corporations, then eventually become the dominant form of corporate organization.
And here in 2022, where the foundations are being built, I'm curious, are you seeing an increase in adoption this year? And how do you think we can keep that momentum growing?
Yeah, so we definitely see an increase in adoption. We, here at Tally, we are seeing hundreds of DAOs being created a week, which is pretty amazing. People are spending money in these organizations, right? People are spending a lot of money through these organizations. The treasuries are, sure, we're in a bear market, but you couldn't tell that if you're looking at like DAO signups, right? Like if you look at from the number of people looking to build these organizations. Sometimes I joke that DAOs are the new NGOs. Like if you remember back in college, right? Like the cool thing to be doing if you're in like sort of like some sort of like not liberal arts, but like political science or something like that. Everyone's like, I want to like work at an NGO or I want to start an NGO. Well, all those people are trying to build DAOs now. People are trying to apply the DAO concept to so many new kinds of organizations because the DAOs speak to people in many different ways, right? We haven't even talked about how DAOs give members a kind of participation that they don't find in regular corporations, right? Where they feel that the organization that they're working for is the organization that they also own, right? That they also like direct. So people are taking that sort of like sense of ownership and really applying it to all sorts of organizations that they are building in the real world, right? So even in places where maybe that capital efficiency question isn't really top of mind, we still see people preferring to create DAOs as organizations.
And this can be a very daunting space, especially for new users. And I don't want you to give any financial advice here. We always have to put that disclaimer in. But are there any tips on how to invest in DAOs without losing your money or becoming a victim of a fraud that you could possibly help people with?
Sure, absolutely. So first of all, this is not financial advice.
Yeah.
Second of all, the best way to invest in DAOs and not have any risk of losing money is to go work for a DAO. Join a DAO and contribute to it, right? People want to invest in DAOs to make, people want to invest in DAOs, right? But it's kind of like seeing a group of kids outside who made a club and being like, oh, I want to invest in that club. It doesn't really always make sense. Right? Like if there's some kids outside and they come up with some sort of cool new game that they're playing together, you wouldn't go walk up to those kids in the street and be like, yo, I got some money. I want to give it to you guys. I went in, your club looks cool. And I think for a large part, I think that's how a lot of DAOs should be seen as well. You wouldn't just walk up to some group of people who were excited about something and just give them money and try and profit off of them. Yeah. But what you would do is you walk up to them and say, what you're doing seems really cool. Can I get involved? Can I participate? Can I help? That's kind of the way to quote unquote invest in DAOs that I think makes sense for people. It's not, if somebody's selling you a DAO to invest, I would just think long and hard. There are DAOs that look for funding. I think that you're better off leaving that to professionals, right? Just investing in a DAO. I mean, at the same time, it's not a bad idea either, right? If people are building something that's really cool and you do want to be involved and they're like, well, the best way you can help us is give us your money. I would just say that just know what community you are dealing with really well, right? Because, these communities, they aren't yet bound by regulations in the way that traditional companies are, right? You could certainly invest in a DAO and that DAO vote you out of the community, right? You could just be like, I give you money, you work for me now. And the DAO could be like, thanks for your money. And we just had a vote and we're kicking you out, right? And that's entirely possible. And that has happened before and that will happen again in these organizations. So yeah, I don't know. I think I'm disinclined to say that you should think about DAOs as something to invest in, especially at this phase as an individual. I certainly think VCs do a lot of investments in DAOs, but they have different time horizons. They have different resources. They have different sort of viewpoints. Also, a lot of VCs investing in DAOs actually contribute a lot of value. They participate in a lot of DAOs. So it's a different kind of investment that they are ready to make. And they're also ready to lose their money, right? So it's a very different relationship. So yeah, I don't know. I kind of have a mixed response on that. Again, not financial advice, but I do think it's fine for DAOs to go out and raise money. I think that's important. They need money to operate. But I wouldn't be the first person just to advise random people to go try and invest in DAOs. But I also wouldn't recommend, again, not legal advice, not a lawyer, I wouldn't recommend DAOs to go and try and get money from random people either. Yeah. But, I'm not a lawyer and, what it looks like to create a DAO in the Maldives is very different from what it looks like to create a DAO in Delaware. So, buyer beware, builder beware, creator beware. But all things are possible. Certainly there's DAOs like Nouns DAO where you have to buy your way in, right? But whether or not you see that as an investment, I think is a different subject, right? Sometimes these membership DAOs, you may think of it as an investment, but at the same time, you might just be purchasing membership, right? Which is also, I think, fine, right? I don't know. I guess I'm kind of conflicted in that. I think in general, if you're thinking about how do I invest in DAOs, you're probably thinking about it the wrong way. Yeah. But you shouldn't stop yourself from being excited and contributing to organizations or wanting to be a member of organizations that you are excited to be a member of. maybe that's like the best
Yeah.
way that sort of solves all the sort of like contradictions in my statements.
Beautiful. And you mentioned the word excitement there. So what excites you about the future? And equally, what excites you about the role that Tally will play in that future too?
Well, I'm excited to see people create so many more organizations.
Yeah.
Right. That's what I'm really, really excited to see. There's just so many things that can be built. At Tally, we've been building DAOs. We have a new one that we're working on called Content Guild.
Yeah.
And Content Guild is a content DAO that basically we are using to create our newsletter, to create our articles. And the idea behind it is, okay, what if we can find a way to get the people who work with us even more involved and have like a greater sense of participation? And what we're doing with this DAO is we started with 4 editors, which is myself, it's got Tyler, Tommy, and Shannon. And we're like the initial editors. And people can pitch story ideas to us, right? Like article ideas to us around DAOs. And then we vote. And if we like the idea, we commission it essentially. And then the users submit an invoice to the DAO to be paid. And then we vote and we pay it out via that. But what's exciting is that we want to create a path for reoccurring writers to become editors as well. Right. So if you contribute to Content Guild over and over and over, we want there to be a path to editorship where you then join the sort of like voting board. And now when people come and pitch ideas, you too are part of the process of sort of thinking about what sort of content we will want to create and what we think is valuable. So we want to make that sort of like an engine that can be self-sustaining. Right. And at the moment, Tally is like the client of Content Guild, right? Because we give it a budget where that sort of spent on content that sort of like ostensibly sort of serves our interest in like broadening the larger community's understanding of DAOs. But long term, we see it becoming a real self-sufficient organization where other teams can come and say, hey, we would also like to be a client of Content Guild. This is our budget. Editors, please find sort of like writers and content creators who sort of match our sort of like needs, and then the Content Guild can sort of like get this engine running when it becomes a sort of like decentralized agency of thoughtful people, right? And that's really exciting because you can do that for so many different kinds of organizations.
Love that, and love talking with you today. And we started the podcast talking about your origin story and what put you on this path. But now I'm going to ask you to leave everyone listening with a personal note of inspiration. So I'm going to ask you to share either your favourite song or a song that's important to you that we can add to our Spotify playlist, or a book that we can add to our Amazon wish list. All I ask is a reason behind your choice, and we'll get that added. But does either of those sound...
I will do the book.
Oh, cool.
There's a book that I have. It's a really simple read. It's an easy read. It's fun. I had a coach recommend it to me. It's called The E-Myth. Let me get the author right now. The author is Michael E. Gerber.
Yeah.
It's basically talking about franchises, essentially, on how to build a franchise. But it's really, really great in that it's such a smart way of thinking about how you should build a business and why you should build a business and what sort of thinking you should do when you go into building a business. But really, you can apply all of it to your own life as well. So it's very thoughtful, and some of it's very obvious, but you don't really realize it until it's sort of like put into one place. Again, it's a very easy read. It's a very lightweight read, but especially if you're an entrepreneur and if you're thinking about building a DAO, it's definitely a read that you want to take a look at.
Fantastic. Well, I'll get that added straight to our Amazon wish list. And I'm conscious we've talked a lot about Tally today. For anyone that wants to join your community, ask a member of your team a question, or just find out more information, what's the best starting point for everything?
Yeah, so tally.xyz is the best place to start. You can also follow our Twitter, which is tallyxyz. And we also have a Discord, which you can find at the site. What's really cool is we also have our own podcast. Don't mind us shilling our own podcast called
Absolutely.
Dow Talk. It is really pretty great. You can find that on Spotify. That's frequently hosted by Tommy and Tyler. They're a great duo. They've done maybe like 10 or 12 of them so far. Pretty awesome. We also run a conference in New York called Dow NYC. You can find that at dow-nyc.xyz. We just had our last one. We're going to do another one next year. Really pretty awesome, just like next level conference. So yeah, there's a lot of ways to get in touch. And then you can follow me as well on Twitter. And I am just at Dennison Bertram.
Well, I'll add all those links to the show notes so people can find you nice and easily, including the link to the podcast as well. I'll be checking that out and love chatting with you today about starting, joining and growing decentralized organizations. Such an exciting space. And also for bringing it to life with your personal story and that realization and put you on the path to Tally. So a big thank you for sharing that with me.
My pleasure. Thank you so much.
So when we recorded today's interview, it was something like 95 degrees Fahrenheit for our US friends. And it was equally hot for Dennis in Prague. And I think he found himself in a WeWork booth, which was quite warm to say the least. But I'm so glad we recorded it, because it was such a great conversation. So many great insights in there. And Dennis is just one of those guys you could just hit it off with straight away, chat for hours. And I do hope to grab a cold beverage of some description one day in the future. But let me know what you thought of today's conversation. Maybe you've got a completely different mindset when it comes to DAOs. And if you have, I invite you to come on here and sit down and share your story too. So email me, techblogwriter@outlook.com. We'll keep this conversation going. And I also invite you to come and join me again tomorrow. So a big thank you for listening as always. And until next time, don't be a stranger.
Thank you for listening to the Tech Talks Daily Podcast with Neil C. Hughes. Remember, technology works best when it brings people together.